being on that course, that was my home. I knew that there was nothing else in this world, but being my journey, that was my place in life at that period of, or that point in time. That was my work. That was my discovery. That was my dreams. That was just my daily routine. That was just myself. And now that I was back out on course, I was back being who I was, and I felt like I was being where I should be. And I knew on that day, on that Thursday, which was day 26, I knew then no matter what happens, I will get to the end. Uh, Whether it's with a good distance, whether it's not, it didn't matter anymore. But I knew no matter what happened, I had nothing in my head to say, maybe in 10 days' time, I'm going to want to feel like I want to stop again. I just knew that that was never going to come back into my mind.
Welcome to the Mindset for Runners podcast, helping you to access and unlock your true potential as an athlete. Hey, it's Rob, and welcome to this interview with Stephen Redfern. I've been wanting to get Stephen on this podcast for a long time, and I'm so filled with joy to be able to bring you this interview that we've put together for you. I'm about to read Stephen's bio to you, so stand by to be blown away. That's all I can say by this. So let's get into it. Stephen's an aircraft engineer for Qantas in Sydney. So he works 12-hour shifts, rotating from a night shift and a day shift. Here we go. In 2014 is when he actually started running with a half marathon. A few months later, he ran his first 100K race, which is the Human Hovel 100K. And then only 5 weeks later, completed one of the toughest races in Australia, the Alpine Challenge in the Victoria Alps. That's a 100-mile race. In 2016, he won the Narrabeen All-Nighter, 12-hour trail, before podium at his first 24-hour track race in Sydney. He then travelled to New Zealand to complete the mountainous Northbourne Station 100-miler, where he finished in 6th place. Later that year, he was second in the Human Hovel 100-miler before he burst onto the scene in ultra running Australia in December with a 3rd place at Costa Kosciuszko. The next 3 years saw Stephen as a dominating force in Australian ultra running. Let's go to 2017. He won the Narrabeen All-Nighter again. He won the Sri Chinmoy 24-hour track race. He won the Human Hovel 100-miler that year. He was 2nd place at the Track Ultra in WA, 2nd place in the Buffalo Stampede Grand Slam. He was 3rd place at the grueling Great Southern Endurance Run, also in the Victorian Alps. 4th place when it was still a point-to-point Great North Walk 100-miler. I mean, wow, what a year, only his 3rd year of ultra running. Let's move on to 2018. He won the Hubert 100-mile in the Flinders Ranges in South Australia. He won the Sri Chinmoy 24-hour Sydney again. He won the Ned Kelly Chase 100-kilometre. He travelled to WA where he won the Waters Trail on Foot 100-miler. He then travelled to USA where he got entry into the Western States Endurance Run. That's a 100-mile race, one of the 2 big 100-mile races in the world, the other being Ultra Trail Mont Blanc. He placed an amazing 34th overall in what is always an elite field at Western States. Also in that year, he was 2nd in the Canberra 24-hour track race, 3rd at the Cradle Mountain Ultra in Tasmania, and 4th on the Canberra 50-kilometre road, proving he's able to perform at distances right across that spectrum. Then he was selected, thankfully, to represent Australia for the first time at the Asia and Oceanic Championships in Suzhou, Taiwan, where he placed 12th overall. Then his results continued in 2019. Stand by for more. He won the 12-hour track race in Coburg, Victoria. He won the Sri Chinmoy 12-hour track race and was 2nd in the awesome 231-kilometre West Max Monster. That's a race that completes the entire length of the Larapinta Trail west of Alice Springs. He ran that in a time of 42 hours, 36 minutes. He then travelled later that year to do Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, 100 miles, before again representing Australia at the World 24-Hour Championships in France. 2020 brought COVID, and a lot of the races around the world were closed down, as you know. But this saw an evolution in Stephen's running into longer multi-day races. He was able to get to Hong Kong to compete in the 298-kilometre 4 trails, where he placed 2nd in a time of 2 days, 6 hours and 46 minutes. He also ran the Sri Chinmoy Canberra 100K trail and the Australian Invitational 24 hours, and the Adelaide 12 hours. He returned to Costa Cosi in December for his second finish. In 2020, we saw Stephen invent the Garage Ultra. So due to being able to race for COVID, he cleared out his 3-car garage and created a 32.5 metre track around his garage, which he ran around for 4 days, covering a total of 360 kilometres, which is obviously 90 kilometres per day running around his garage. In 2021, with COVID still affecting races, Stephen was second place at Sri Chinmoy Canberra 48-hour track with a distance of 326 kilometres before going back to Costa Cosi for his third finish. I hope you're hanging in there. In 2022, he ran the Sri Chinmoy's 48-hour track. He represented Australia for the third time in India at the Asian and Oceanic Championships before heading to New York to complete what I still believe is the most mind-blowing race in the world, the Sri Chinmoy Self-Transcendence 3100 mile. So that's just shy of 5,000 kilometres, where you run around a concrete path and a half-mile block around just a city block in Queens. We're going to hear about that in this interview. Now, to qualify for that race, due to COVID, Stephen was supposed to qualify in a sanctioned 6-day race, but there were no races that he could get to due to being locked down. So he went to his local athletics track every day for 6 days and ran from sunup to sundown, covering a total of 650 kilometres to qualify for that race. In 2023, he was fourth at the Australian 6-day race in Canberra, running 638.7 kilometres, and got his fourth finish at Costa Kosciuszko. Early before Costa Cosi 2023, he was granted entry to the famous Barkley Marathons in Tennessee, another mind-blowing race and worth checking out if you haven't already heard of the Barkley Marathons. In 2024, he returned to Hong Kong for the 298 Four Trails again, before being invited to run the last annual Vol State endurance run in USA. So this is the same race director as the Barkley Marathons and the inventor of the backyard ultras around the world. So Lazarus Lake's got another race called the last annual Vol State, which is a 500-kilometre totally unsupported race with just carrying a backpack and a map, and you have to find your own way. Stephen completed that earlier this year. In training for Vol State, he ran a 160-kilometre unsupported run from Sydney to Bundanoon, and then 3 weeks later backed that up with a 150-kilometre Sydney urban loop, also unsupported. Are you as blown away as I am putting this bio together? He's so passionate about unsupporting runs, but also exploring your limits. So he's a big fan of running the fastest known times. If you've never seen this website, go check out fastest known times. So he currently holds the record for these fastest known times. These are all unsupported, mostly run solo. 105-kilometre Canangra to Katoomba out and back, 135-kilometre Blue Mountains Peak to Creek, the 100-kilometre Glenbrook Lollipop, the 105-kilometre Royal National Park Loop, and the 110-kilometre Kosciuszko National Park Grand Loop, as well as 83-kilometre Blue Mountains Express. Now, on top of all of this, all of these results, all of this incredible running history that we've just heard, and I'm sure that I've missed a few races or events, so forgive me for that, Stephen. But Stephen's also passionate about giving back to the ultra running community. And so he gives his time. He's the Secretary of AUTRA, the Australian Ultra and Trail Runners Association, and he's also a race director of his own race, the Southern Sydney 24-hour track race. Now, this is a track race that used to be run by Sri Chinmoy in Sydney before they moved their race to Canberra. And Stephen stepped in and said, Sydney needs a 24-hour race. And he took it over, and he's the race director of that. Incidentally, that race is coming up on the weekend of 31st of August, 2024. So check it out. What a bio. So with that, I'm going to get into this interview with the amazing, inspiring, and just mind-blowing Stephen Redfern. Please enjoy this interview. All right, so I'm so grateful, so inspired, and a little bit nervous to be joined by the amazing Stephen Redfern, who we've got with us for the interview. Stephen, thanks so much for carving out this time today, mate.
Oh, you're welcome. When you asked me to if I'd like to come and do this, I was really excited. especially from yourself. So yeah, thank you for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to having a nice chat with you, just over all things running and yeah, where I've come from and where I'm going. So awesome.
That's good. Thanks, mate. Let's start here. I've known you now for around about 7 or 8 years, and in that time, I've been a part of your journey and watched you grow in your running from bursting onto the scene after probably a couple of years of doing your time, and then either winning or podium on 90% of the races you entered in, like 2018, 2019. You were a force to be reckoned with. But then I've seen you grow in the races that you've gone to, and what you've sought out, and the real journey that you have been on and are still on. So, and we're going to unpack that today. But I want to start by asking you, what has running taught you? I've heard you say before it's about self-discovery, and um, I'd like to know what it's taught you, what you've learned about yourself from running, and what continues to unlock in you as you go on this almost quest as you grow.
Running for me, it's I never went into it to change myself. I always wanted to run for a lot of years. I used to do a lot of bushwalking for most of my life, and I used to use that to really discover myself and just trying to decide who I was. A lot of the times, bushwalking was there to calm me down. I was very much quite an agitated, bit of a hothead sort of person. Always on the go, and bushwalking was a good way to just slow my life down a bit. So when I got into running, it was not so much to continue that, but I've always wanted to do it. I felt that it was a nice progression from bushwalking. But since starting running and growing with my running, I've realized that that has actually what I've used, the same as bushwalking. It's grown me as a person. The biggest thing I think I found with running is it's made me feel comfortable more with myself. It has calmed me down immensely to what I used to be as a younger person, and made me just take a step back and rethink about who I want to be and where I want to go in life. So, and the 10 years that I've been running now, I attribute that to changing my life like on a huge scale. I'm such a different person to who I used to be. I really enjoy who I am at the moment. I love my outlook on life, and I love who I've discovered along the way while I've been running for those 10 years. Like the people I've met, the mentors that I've met through running, and how they've also helped shape me to who I am. And what's really nice about it is while I'm still doing it, I'm still discovering every year. So it's not like the first few years made me who I was and then that's it. I keep finding I keep reinventing that each year, or it's just reinventing myself. So it's doing it naturally. I don't have to think about it, and I still always love where it's going. So and that's why I just really enjoy discovering my running, trying something new each time, and showing myself that I don't have to be scared with anything out there. Everything's doable, and just give yourself a go. So I think taking up running a lot, and how it's actually shaped me to who I am today, and hopefully how I go into the future.
That's such a beautiful answer. So many questions I want to ask you based on that. But what things about yourself have you discovered that when you describe yourself as a bit of a hothead in the past, what have you discovered, like maybe one or two examples about yourself that running has taught you that's helped you to be where you are now, where you're proud of yourself, the outlook you have, and you feel like you want to keep on growing?
It's really calmed me down as a person. So I would often get very worked up over a lot of things. And I'd get taken the wrong way a lot of the time because of just probably how my approach would be, how I would look through my approach. So running's taught me, and I think because of the style of running I do, I do a lot of running on my own. I love just getting out and just shutting out the world and just going within myself for runs that could be anywhere from 15 Ks to 100 miles. And is not unusual for me just to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to have a nice long run today. and end up running 100 miles over the next 24 hours. And it gives me a chance to just really slow down in my busy life. So I've discovered that running has made me take a step back, and before jumping in at the deep end, think first before I actually go ahead and do it. And because of that, it's really calmed me down as a person, and it's calmed my outlook on life. So I, instead of so much as being angry with the world, I actually enjoy what the world is out there, and enjoy what my life is now, instead of finding reasons why I shouldn't be enjoying it. And out of all of that, the biggest discovery is quite unusual is I'll be having a chat with you now with this podcast. Prior to running, I was lucky to ever be able to talk 2 words to a person. I could never stand up in front of other people, especially could never talk to people I didn't know. Where now I actually feel a lot more comfortable. I can actually do it. And I think I can see it even just over the 10 years, how I would talk in my first few years, to how I can be comfortable talking now. So much different. And that's equated back through my working environment. I have a very high stress role at work, and I deal with pretty much every department within Qantas where I work and within the airport outside of our business. And I deal with a whole bunch of different people every single day. So I never have the same people I work with every day. And through what I do now, it's allowed me to actually be able to do that role. So it has had a big impact on my life and show me and will grow me as a person, which probably for the first 40 years, I probably felt I grew very little as opposed to how I've grown over just these last 10 years.
What an amazing testimony to how running is a metaphor for the growth we have in life. And hearing you say about your articulation and your confidence and how people see you, it's really beautiful for me to hear that you can map that across into life. And from there, we need to ask your approach to running. You seek out adventures that to most of us seem impossible. Can you tell us how you choose the next adventure and what you look for? And can you weave in there around the sense of possibility of failure and how you kind of approach those races and balance that out? Because the races you do are unbelievable.
So I had been lucky probably up until I would almost say even just to this year. I'd never really had failed in a race. Probably the only 2 races I had ever stopped short, and with those style of races, they were 2 track races, and for their unknown reasons for each one, instead of running for the full time limit, I had stopped slightly short. But with them, they're never seen as a failure or a you haven't finished the race. It's just that was the distance I would achieve. I didn't achieve that all the way through to the end of the time. It wasn't until this year I had gone back for a second run at a race in Hong Kong called the Hong Kong Four Trails. It just probably my mind was in the right place. I had a lot going on at home. I was still rediscovering the body and coming back out of what I had done in New York back in 2022. And I had gone halfway through that race, and it was the first time in my life I'd actually come to a decision that I could not finish. It took me all night long through that night to decide, do I call the race director? And I felt it was the right place to do it. So after 130 Ks, I had rung the race director. He pleaded with me to just wait a bit, move on and see how I feel, which I did. I'd gone another 15 Ks and I had decided it wasn't right for me. It was a hard call because I knew as soon as I called the race director, I turn off my tracker, that's it, my race is done, and I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I had to then get my helper to come and pick me up. So it wasn't like I'm finishing at a point where everyone's there. And this race is done all self-supported. So when you're out there, you don't have anyone with you. You're not running with big groups of people. There's no aid waiting for you 10 Ks down the road. So you are purely on your own. So your decisions you make are purely yours. You can't put that onto anybody else. So I did end up, you could say, I call it did not finish, quit, however you want to put it, which was okay. I turned off my tracker. It took about 2 hours for my helper to come and pick me up. Went back to the hotel. Probably for 24 hours, I did feel a bit down. But then when I woke up the next day, I had decided I've got to look at it slightly differently. I've got to look at the reasons why I did it at the time. And I felt it was the right reasons. I really needed to just stop, take a step back, and just maybe rediscover why I'm doing this. And I think that was the first race where having to stop like that and pulling out halfway gave me that chance to then go, why am I doing this? What do I want to do? And how do I want to keep going for the future? And I realized I wanted to get back to where I was, as you mentioned, that 2018, 2019 era. Well, not so much wanting to get back to winning races. I wanted to get back to knowing inside my heart why I wanted to do running in those races. And this allowed me to do that. So I had a very nice discovery for the last 4 months. I came home. I still had a lot of issues from running in the 3,100-mile race 2 years earlier. It made me go and start seeing my physio, which I've known for 8 years. And we started a really nice program. We slowed everything down a bit and then slowly built it back up. And over that, for the last 4 months, I've actually come back to a point where I really feel like I've now gone back 4 years or 5 years, and my mind and how I'm enjoying running is actually now back at that stage where I was prior to feeling like I had at the start of this year. So that I think I needed to do. So in pulling out of that one race, my first race, at the end of the day, it had a positive effect on me. It made me just slow down and take a step back and discover where I wanted to go. Now, a lot of the races I like doing, while I did do a lot of the sort of longer but normal style races in the early days, the more I move on, and I've always been this sort of person, I've always got to keep challenging myself. I feel that challenge allows me to discover within me what I'm capable of doing, what anyone can do, and how far can you go before maybe it's too much. And I think it made me realize nothing's ever too much. You've just got to then readjust how you approach it. So I could go from a 200K race and go, oh, that was pretty tough, to then pick a 300K race or a run and go, oh, can I do this? And find that you can by just slightly adjusting. Step up, I end up running the 3,100-mile race in New York for 2 years, like for 2 months. And that had a really different approach. That was a very self-discovery run. And it just showed me even with the issues I had entailed through that race, at no point did I find that race was me wanting to not finish it. There was always in my mind, I'm going to finish, but just how will I finish and how do I approach it to get to the end? Moving forward, I'm now starting to enjoy some extra long training runs during the week. And that's led me into my last race, which I just came back from Tennessee over in over in United States. And it's a race called Last Annual Vol State. And it's a run across the state of Tennessee. Officially, it's 520 Ks long. My recording ended up being 550, but when you are trying to navigate yourself, running through towns, I think there was a few extra bonus kilometers in there. But this one was a fully self-supported, no help, no aid stations, nothing for you along the way. You just get dropped at the start and you're told to run this course over 500 kilometers and we'll be waiting for you at the finish line. So it showed me with everything I've been doing that you look at that and you think, how can one run that distance and have nothing? You can't carry that. Nothing's going to be there waiting for you. I didn't know the course. I've never been there before. All I knew was what I could see on the map. And you just got to trust yourself that just head out and do it. There are stuff along the way and just discover it along as you go. When you know you get to a town, don't push through like you might in a normal race and go, I'll go to the next town. You know you've got to slow down, pick up some stuff, get some fluids, get some food, have something to eat, have a rest, stop, recover a little bit, and then you move on. And time doesn't become a matter anymore. It just becomes, how do I get through this? So that's what I like doing. I like, it gives me a chance to analyze, gives me a chance to think about how I'm going to approach it without going into a race, having it all written out and saying, this is how you're going to get from A to B, exactly with these steps. You've got to do that yourself. So that's how I challenge myself. And I think that's what keeps me excited about what I'm doing, because you just don't know what the next thing's going to be. And that's your next challenge.
It's such a beautiful outlook that you have, mate. And we're going to go, I want to take you to the self-transcendence race in a second, but you've mentioned this last annual Vol State, which is a mind-blowing race. And I know there's another one coming up for you as well that is even more mind-blowing. Um, what we know about you is you're so deliberate in the way you choose a race and the reasons that you want to go there. And you've touched on those reasons for Vol State, but can you like elaborate and give us more examples of reasons that you choose a race like this 530K run where you don't have any support and you do it all yourself and you have to find your own place to stay and place to eat? And then the next adventure you've got coming up in England, and what are those deeper reasons that you find that this race brings out of you?
So Vol State was something I picked purely for those reasons. Is I wanted to know that I could do something and I had to do it for myself. I didn't want to have it be chosen for me. Vol State, or the race that Gary Cantrell puts on, are very, very unique, and he has very specific reasons why he puts a race together. With the Vol State, yes, you choose to do it self-supported. You start at the finish line, you get driven to the start line the day before, so you have no choice but to run back to the finish line. So that's where your vehicle is waiting for you. With Vol State, you get one luck thing, is the course is a known course. So you can pick that course off the website and you can analyze it, and you can do your homework and research as to where that's going. But end of the day, you've still got to run 500 and something Ks across the state. The next one, so that I loved, because it's just not normal. I find if I can do that, I'm discovering in myself what I'm capable of. It allows me to grow that little bit further, and allows me to realize that, say, why people might grow at work and move up and then they get new experiences and they get a different role. That's how I see my running. It's how I get that new experience, and it gives me a different role into what I am running, and then it makes me realize that there might be more out there that I can then have a look at. And everything has a different challenge. So it still comes back to my mind, and it comes back to how I want to approach it. And I then get that satisfaction knowing that I've completed that, but I've done that, having to discover that myself. So that was this one. So after finishing this, I had the opportunity to sign up and give another race that Gary Cantrell, or Laz, puts on, and it's called Heart of the South. So he shortens it to HOTS. So this one is slightly different, same idea, but what's more unique is Heart of the South is, again, you get driven to the finish, or you drive to the finish line and you hop on the bus the day before. You then get driven to an unknown start line destination. So for 12 months while we're waiting for the race, he does not divulge what the course is, and he will only give you that when you hop on the bus 24 hours out, and only then do you know where your start is going to be. And for HOTS, every year the distance changes a little according to the course that he may pick. And it just happens to be, for next year, it's now 650 kilometers long, so 400 miles. He said when he put it together, he couldn't shorten it where he was going. So that's just how it ended up being. So this will be a slightly more better, nicer challenge. So one, it's going to be a bit longer. So you know you're going to have to run extra time. Again, this one is 100% no support allowed for anybody in the race. And then you've got to then do all your homework over 24 hours about what the course is going to be like, And he makes this one slightly harder is there's a few less towns and there's bigger distances where there's less facilities that you can actually hop into. So it makes you have to think a bit more strategic when you do go through one place before moving on to the next. How long is it going to be? What you're going to need? How hot is it going to be? So you don't leave yourself short. So a bit more work that you've got to do while you're running. So again, it makes you have to then think a bit more, and it's just not shut everything down and just run because you know the next point's coming up shortly. So I'm looking forward to that one. I feel that's just a slight next level to what I've just done. But going, as you mentioned, I've been following another race over in England for 4 years. It just never worked out that I could actually do it because of the time frame. So I had an opportunity that I knew it comes up in February next year. And so I put my name forward to it, and I got accepted into a race called the Tunnel 200-mile Ultra. And what I like about this one is it is completely different to any other race I think that is out there. So it's 200 miles running through a 1 mile long disused rail tunnel under the city of Bath in England. So you run a mile out and a mile back, and you do that 100 times for the out and back, all in a darkened tunnel, all with no support, no music allowed. So you have to run just for yourself, and you have to run within your own mind. And between the hours of 11 o'clock at night and 5 in the morning, the local council turn the lights out in the tunnel. So all you have is yourself and your head torch, and you're in just a pitch black environment, and you spend 2 days underground in that black environment. And it's about, are you able to push through all those senses and find something within yourself to get you to the end? So to me, that is an amazing challenge, and I've been waiting for about 4 years to give that one a go. So it's so I get a chance next year to give it a go, and I like it because it's going to push my limits a bit. And everything you read, it does push everyone's mental limits. So physically, it shouldn't be any different, but it's that mental state that can you push past your mind telling you that you can't do this anymore, or you're going stir crazy because nothing changes for 2 days. But once you push past that, you can look beyond where that barrier is and discover what's on the other side. And I think once you do that, you can just keep going for as long as you want. So Vol State was the same. Day 2 was that barrier. A lot of people pulled on day 2. I did have a couple of moments on day 2 that I had to dig really deep to look past that barrier, thanks to a bit of help from the organisers who wouldn't accept my thoughts of, can I do this? And made me go out there and just keep going. But once I got past that barrier on day 2, the rest of the race, which was still probably about close to 300 Ks, it was wonderful. You're on the other side, and it's like a whole new world. And instead of it shrinking on you, it just grows bigger and bigger as you go. So I'm hoping the next race in Bath will give that same idea and allow me to look past that and to discover what's on the other side and know that you can keep going. So yeah, it should be a good challenge.
It's amazing. Can you share how you manage your mindset in those moments? For example, day 2 of the Vol State. We haven't even touched on Queens, New York yet. But when it is monotonous, or when your mind starts to ask you, like you said, can I do this? And I'm thinking about, your garage ultra back over the Easter long weekend in the COVID lockdown. When your mind is saying, can I do this, or it wants to quit, can you share with us how you manage that mind and as you say, push past it?
So for Vol State, the first phone call I made was to my wife. It was actually in the morning. So she had come over with me, but because she wasn't allowed any part of the race, she was enjoying a week in Nashville while I was running across Tennessee. I often find her approach is really good. Sometimes I need that as what we would call maybe a bit of a kick up the bum. So this was the morning of day 2, and I had rang her and not letting the organisers know. I wanted to get her feeling on it. And it was actually a bit of a laughable moment because she turned around and she said, well, maybe it's time I need to just suck it up and push past the barrier that we all get. And then her next voice was, well, I've got a tour I've booked into. I've got to go. So I can't sit around talking to you all day. So how about you decide and you let me know when you're ready, but I'm going out and enjoying my day. So off she went. So I'm left in the middle of nowhere, having to make my own decision. And always, I think anyone who has to then put that decision back on yourself, it is a very hard decision to make because you know you can't put it on anybody else. If I'd said, that's it, I'm done, I can only blame myself. There's nothing worse than going, Christ, I've got to blame myself. So she made me realize, have a bit of a break. I patched my feet up a little bit and off I went. But to get through that day, and it was a horrible day, really hot, very exposed, little shade. We're actually running down one of the interstate highways, so it was a very open area. Instantly, you stop thinking about what's up ahead. And what I've done in past races, like the 3100, you bring your mind back to the moment that you're in. And that's how I find I can get through no matter what the distance is I just run in the moment that I'm in. So that could be, I'm now running for the next 500 meters or the next mile. And I'll get to that point, and then that's my decision on, do I need a rest? Can I keep going? How am I feeling? And that's, you break it down into small chunks. But I think you got to put your mind in those small chunks too. So from that point, I could actually just free my mind, and I didn't care about the distance anymore. Distance didn't matter except for that next 20 miles between where I was and the next town. And the only thing you've got to think about is strategizing yourself to make sure you can get to the next set of resources. So as long as you've got enough to get from here to there, that's what you've got to worry about. You know you're going to make it to the next town, and you've got places where you can buy more fluids, more food. All you have to think about is what's in front of you. So my race then became a 25K race. And all I thought about was breaking that down in the heat of the day. If I get to a point, I've just got to slow down, I would just stop in the shade. 10 minutes in the shade, time didn't matter anymore. It was just about feeling good. So that day had a lot of stops. It probably took, for about 25 miles, it probably took me about 12 hours to run 25 miles. Quite surprisingly, I found with a lot of people around me, everyone was having the same feeling on the exact same day. And I was surprised at how many people said they didn't go very far over a 12-hour period. It was that sort of changing from the hype of day one to getting through, and it was that barrier all over again. Once you could get through that, it was then you're into the next stage of the race, and it started opening up, and I started feeling good again. And that's the best way to do it. It's makes me, I can go out on my midweek long run and fairly long, but I break that right down. So I don't think about my finish line being 100 miles away, or my loop back to my home is 150 Ks. I just know that I'm running through this section and that will get me to the next point. Well, it's changed now. I've gone through the suburbs. I'm now on the beach. So I get to run along the water. The water changes maybe to a lovely river. So you're running along that for the next stint. Or I'm coming out at Olympic Park. Oh, great. There's my next goal. Once you do that, you can actually enjoy the area that you're in. And that's how I set my mind. And I think when I look for other races, I want to be able to get something that can challenge me to maybe get back to that and know how to get back through that again. So that's how I get through a lot of this. Running on my own and allowing me to just take most of the world out of it and then just bring my mind back to within myself. It allows me to do that. So, and that's, I think, where I get most of my enjoyment from when I do my running. And that's why I run a lot. I do run a lot on my own, because it's my own discovery. So I don't need to prove that to anybody else. I think I'm always proving it to myself. So if I can prove it to myself, then I'm proud of myself. That allows me to move on to the next challenge.
It's So many good lessons. And as you're talking, my mind's going to, when you did the 6 day run around the track at Barton Ridge to qualify for the race that I'd like to talk to you next, and how I've heard you say in the past that when people say to you, how do you deal with the monotony of track racing, for running around an athletics track for 24 or 48 hours, or doing a 6 day or a 4 day race? And I've heard you say before, it doesn't really matter because it's me moving along a path, and it's not about what's around me, it's about what's inside me and how I'm dealing with surroundings. Am I paraphrasing what you've said?
No, no, that's exactly how I look at it. Whether I'm running a point to point for 500 Ks, or whether I'm running, as you said, 360 Ks around my garage on a 32-meter loop, I don't see it as there's nothing monotonous, and they're all the same. It's just my pathway for my journey, and whether it's 32 meters or 500 Ks, they're all exactly the same. So the loop never ends. It's the same as the point to point. It never ends. So if people say, yeah, but I've got a goal when I'm running to another point 500 Ks away, that's great. So you're always looking forward, but you don't ever look that far. So I'm not even looking what's in front of me. So if I'm running around my garage on a 32-meter loop, it's still only exactly what's in front of my feet. It's the next 2 or 3 steps. I don't look to my left and go, oh, that loop's just there. I'm going to be there in 2 seconds time, and then do that 43,000 times. It's you just take that out of your head. As soon as you can take that away, there's no monotony anymore. And it's like, am I enjoying what I'm doing at this present moment in time? Can I let my mind go and just enjoy the moment and what I'm actually doing? And that's how I do it. So I can clear my mind and find that moment is what I'm enjoying. So if I'm running around an athletics track for 6 days, or if I'm running around my garage for 4 days, or if I'm running across the whole state of Tennessee for 5 days, to me, all of those moments are all exactly the same. So I get the same enjoyment out of the whole lot of them. And if you can enjoy that, nothing's monotonous and everything's achievable. So that's my approach. And I think that's why I can change from one to the other and not find I can put myself or shelve myself on one type and give everything a go.
So beautiful. And we hear that meditation teaches us to put that gap between the stimulus and the response. And that's exactly how you're describing it so beautifully. And I want to follow this thread, because as you've progressed through running, you've found Sri Chinmoy, the running, first of all, the running guru, and also the running community that has become in his legacy, Sri Chinmoy. And your association with them from the Sydney 24-hour race, which moved to Canberra, which you have now taken over the Sydney 24-hour, Southern Cities 24-hour as the race director. I want to talk to you about that a bit later. But what I want to go is your association with Sri Chinmoy over the years through 24-hour, 12-hour racing around a track, 48-hour racing, 6-day racing, led you to, I think, the most incredible race in the world. And I'm not sure if many people have heard about it, the Self-Transcendence 3,100-mile around a block in New York, which you were accepted in. Can you tell us about the race? I'd love to hear you unpack it as much or as little as you want to, mate. But also the readiness that you were in to do that race, and how you've spoken in the past about you being mentally ready to take on such a thing, and how you got yourself mentally ready over those couple of years before you actually did the race. I know that's a long question, but can you talk around those things for us?
Oh, most definitely. So just going back with Sri Chinmoy and the organisation, they were one of the very first groups that really sort of I got to discover right at the start of my running. I've probably only been running for, I think it was about 12 months when I did my first race through the Sri Chinmoy Marathon organisation here. It's run by Bachar Stegman. And I just loved their beautiful philosophy. Penny, actually, my wife, volunteered at that one. Now, we both knew nobody, but both just really enjoyed me having a run and her just volunteering. And she got to really know all the people in the organisation. And then having Pachar reach out after that race and just say, lovely to have you guys there. Everyone is so equal. And he goes, we would love to have you back. We love that your wife was volunteering. So please come back and we'll have you at any other race. And that made me then discover what they did. And it wasn't long after I realized that they also put on a 24-hour track race. Now, I had no idea what all this was all about. But even back, and it was probably, I was only been running for 2 years, but even back then it's like, well, this could be a challenge. Maybe I'll be able to challenge myself on something that I didn't even know about. And how far can I go? So I went and did the first one, and the Sri Chinmoy group really accepted me in there. They loved it. Penny again volunteered for the 24 hours. Off I went running, and what I discovered was just amazing. I thought it was a bad race. Surprisingly, it actually, I've been told it was never as bad as what I thought it was. And I think we all do the same in our first track race. Meeting some amazing people, the camaraderie, the community, the self-discovery of what one can actually do at these races, and just realizing just how beautiful the Sri Chinmoy community were. And from there, I've grown an amazing relationship with this group in Australia and with Pachar. And I actually hold Pachar at really high esteem. He's a massive mentor for me. He's allowed me, and what we talked about, how it's grown me as a person. I believe having him in my life and him allowing me to have that same outlook that they do has allowed me to approach running not what I thought might have been the normal way, but looking at it along the ways that they do and realizing that with running, that's there to allow you to discover something bigger in life. And that's how I've discovered myself. And I think that's what's allowed me to grow to who I want to be and who I am today. Coming out at 24-hour, right back in my start of my running, I thought, as I always do, I can't help but I always research everything. So here I am on the net, searching the world, what is this organization? And I discovered right back in 2016, the 3,100-mile race. So I did everything. I read up on it. I followed it. I knew all about this race, but I knew that was just way out of the realms of sensible possibility for myself. And following it for a number of years, it made me realize it's a race that you can't just say, hey, I want to do that. What kudos would it be to go do that race and have it on my resume? I knew it was a sort of a race that it will tell you if it's the right race for you. So I never thought I was ever going to run it. I just thought this is an amazing race. Wow, it inspired me. It allowed me to do a lot of things that I did just watching these guys with what they did. But I realized it was about 5 years. So I knew sort of probably 5 years earlier. And I just one day woke up and I just thought, I feel I'm getting ready to want to run this race. I would love to do it. I'm at a point in my life where I want to discover a bit more. I want to be able to learn how to slow myself down through my running and allow myself to discover ultimately what can one do within themselves. So I had decided quite early. So if we go back to me running in 2022, it was about 2018 that I had decided I will feel like I'll run it one day, but I'm not going to say anything. I actually didn't tell anybody, didn't tell my wife. I've told nobody. And I sat on that for 3 years. And through 2020, with a lot of what life had given all of us, it was a pretty tumultuous year. No one knew how we were going to go. I had a few ups and downs that year, but it made me sit back and realize I knew I was ready and I knew I wanted to run that race. But it wasn't the point where I want to run it that year or the next year. I had put in my head that I wanted to run it in 2022. That was 2 years away. And I felt it was the right time to go and approach Pachar and just say to him, I feel I'm at a point where I'd love to have a go at this, but knowing what it is, what are your thoughts and how can we start the journey for me to become part of this race? So I had emailed Pachar one morning, and there was a couple of things I had emailed him with because we do a lot together. And while he said, everything in your email is important, but you've touched on one word and everything else stops. We're going to talk about this. And it was the fact that I had asked him, I would like to run the 3,100 mile. What are your thoughts? And that was it. So straight away, Pachar had come back and he goes, the most important part of this now is we're going to talk about 3,100. And he goes, finally, you've approached me. I've been waiting for years for you to come and up to me. He said, I always knew you would run it. I was just waiting for you to be ready to come and ask me. And he was over the moon. And that really touched home with me that he had that confidence in me. Probably back when I thought in myself I wanted to do it. It was amazing that he even in himself knew that I was going to do it one day, just when I was ready. So it was a 2-year journey from when I finally asked him to then getting a position on 2022 over in New York. And that was for me, it was exactly the right year that I wanted to do it. I turned 50 that year. It was a big discovery. I knew there was a bit of a change in who I wanted to be. And I think just the way I'd grown in my age, what I've discovered, everything in life, that was a nice turning point. And doing the 3,100 that year was part of that turning point within myself. And I really wanted to go a little bit more spiritual. And I'm not a spiritual person, but within myself, my running is very, very spiritual to me. And I felt that was the perfect race and the perfect moment for me to discover a bit more within myself. How can I approach life a little bit more spiritually and have a better outlook and learn how to push myself to a point where I can discover anything and I can achieve anything. And that's where 2022 came about. So that was my journey leading into actually doing the 3,100, and it was the right time to do it. And I never went in feeling overwhelmed. I got asked a lot in the 12 months leading in, you must be so nervous about doing this race. And it was quite surprising that at no point in that 12 months of my organising to go there, I never once thought about the distance. I never once felt nervous. As you mentioned, I had to then do officially because it's part of the record. And I was lucky enough, if we go back a bit, having that support from Sri Chinmoy in Australia, that was the support that they put forward. Now, if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have had an opportunity. But it was really nice to know that I actually had the support from the organisation who trusted in me. I still had to do something official, and that was they always ask for an official 6-day. We were unlucky at the point that I had to do mine, that all races were cancelled around the world. I had tried to do a 6-day in 2020. That had been cancelled due to the pandemic. 2021, I'd reapplied for the same race. Again, that had been cancelled due to the ongoing pandemic. So I had put forward to the organisation and Pachar that would they accept if I was to run a 6-day around my local track, which I was allowed to do, make it as official as possible. I will record the whole 6 days, and would they accept that? And I was actually lucky, probably a one and only, because of the situation. They said that they would accept that as long as I could show consistency over the 6 days. So that's where my first 6-day track ultra came from. So, and I actually really enjoyed that. I had purpose behind it. Again, it was a new discovery. I achieved what I wanted to achieve out of that. They were more than happy with my goal that I had obtained, and that was then what led me into 2022 in September, being in New York. Now, I had arrived there never running longer than 650 Ks or 6 days. So I knew that everything after that was going to be a discovery. And I sometimes feel in myself doing it that way, that's what motivates me that little bit more. So not going in with the massive experience, but going into an unknown that I have to learn along the way. And I think that's what drives me a little bit more. It does what motivates me. And I had a lot of ups and downs. I had a lot of feet issues, but at no point with all of that, I was never fixated on the distance. And I knew that that's a secondary goal. I was always taught, and how I ever read the race was, it's a discovery and a journey for 52 days. Within that 52 days, to me, the goal of 3,100 miles is the secondary goal. That's what you got to aim for. And I think you need that goal, because if you don't, anyone can go 52 days without anything. It can be easy, but if you got to push yourself for a goal, you understand that there's commitment to be done there. Now, I always said to Pachar, and he always remembered it from the very first go, was I said, I'd love to do this. And I just said, just to let you know, it's not about me wanting to say, hey, I've run 3,100 miles. I told him that I wanted to understand what a journey of discovery was like to go for 52 days. And he said, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, I myself want to make sure that I'm committed to being there for the whole 52 days. And with my issues, with being pulled off the track for 4 days with some pretty bad feet issues, with them allowing me to come back with a bit of healing, I knew in my mind that it didn't matter about the distance anymore. How do I get to the end? And all I want to do is make sure that I'm still there on the last day, on the last hour, finishing my journey and showing them that I was committed for the whole time. And part of that commitment was I was actually exempt for 4 days from having to be on the track while I was healing my feet. And with their one and only rule, you get to run anywhere up to midnight. You've got to go home and stay in your boarding from midnight to 6 a.m. You come back at 6 a.m. You're on course for up to 18 hours. There's no fixed time to finish, but no later than midnight. But the only real rule is they need everyone on the start line at 6 a.m. every morning. You have a 1 minute silence for reflection on where you are and being thankful for the journey you've been given, and then away you go. The organisation actually said that I have an exemption for those 4 days. I don't have to be there, just rest my feet. But I knew in myself, for my commitment, I still needed to show that I was part of the group. We were such a close-knit family, and we're only a group of 12 people. So I actually still got up at 5 a.m. every morning, put on my running clothes, threw on my recovery sandals because I couldn't put shoes on. Myself and my helper, Fiona, we both still went down to the course, and I still stood on that start line at 6 a.m. and acknowledged and honoured the commitment and the journey. And then when 6 o'clock hit, they all went off and ran for 4 days. I then retired and then went back and rested my feet. But I felt I needed those 4 days to show that I was still part of the race, even if it was only just to stand there at 6 a.m. And that's allowed my commitment to go through. So I never missed one single day, even though 4 days recorded a 0 distance, but it still had me being there. So I felt like that was completing myself, and that allowed me to then come back and continue on and go through all the highs and lows. And I had some good periods, and I had some bad periods. We had to adjust every day. Some days I could run all the way through to the end of the day. Other days I was limited to finishing early so I could give my feet more time to recover. But being prepared and being acceptance of that, and not being caught up in, I need to go to midnight every night, that's what allowed me to go to day 52. And I got to the end and I was proud of what I did. And in the end, I didn't really care about the distance. It took a long time for me to accept how far I ran. All I was proud of was I was still there at the end of the day on that day 52. And I felt like my journey was complete. So it changed who I was doing that journey. And I've always said I'd love to go back, and I'm never saying I'm not. I'd still have in my mind that I would love to go back and redo that journey again. But if the opportunity never allowed me to go back, I still feel complete with what I've done. So I don't ever feel like it was a failure or I've never completed it. While I've had a couple of people say, well, you've never completed that race, so you never got to finish. And I just say to them nice and quietly, I actually did finish because I was still there on the last day. I said, if I had not come back after my bad feet, to me, that's not finishing. So, and I don't even get caught up if people say that to me. It's because I know it's not a big part of what that journey was. So I know in myself what I was able to do and what we're taught doing that race. At the end of the day, even though there's a group of 12 of you, there's a community there that support you for the whole time. You are there very much as an individual, and every 12 runners that are on that course have such different journeys. No one journey is the same as the other. So everybody completes their journey, but in their own way. And that's how I saw it. So I was there as myself, and I had my support, and I achieved the journey that I wanted to achieve. So I always feel comfortable and I feel fulfilled with what I've done, and allowing me to move on and discover bigger and different things. And it doesn't have to be bigger distance. It's just bigger challenges and different challenges.
It's mind blowing. And I wonder if people who are listening to, so Stephen got pulled from the race on day 22 because your feet were so bad that the race officials pulled you off and sent you to a podiatrist in New York to get them assessed. And then the podiatrist gave you a time frame of when you could return, and you negotiated a shorter time, but you got back out there. And you say it's like, if you can imagine running for 22 days, your feet are so bad, but you still showed up every morning, and then you got back into the race 4 days later and continued for another 26 days after that with those battered feet. You said it was about the spiritual journey, and every runner has their own journey, and you were given this challenge on day 22, and you dealt with it, and you stayed true to your intention for the race, which was to show up for 52 days. And that's success. And this is how we design our own meaning of what success is. You said it changed you forever. Can you double click on that and tell us a little bit more of how it changed you from the moment you got to Queens to the moment that you left? What was different for you?
So as you mentioned, having the 4 days off course. So when I was taken off, the podiatrist actually gave the race doctors 5 days. And I knew in myself that, and it was 5 days on top of the day that I already had off the day before. So I'd done about 16 laps the day before. So it wasn't huge. It was only about 10 miles. And my mind, I just knew I could not continue. Everyone could see it, my demeanor, my face, everything was just wrong. And I knew honestly myself, I had to stop. I knew the outcome. I knew what the answer was going to be, but I had to hear that answer. Having the podiatrist the next day say, amazing, my feet, the way they recovered externally, and that was the biggest thing. Still, there was a lot of internal issues, but it was more the external to protect what was inside. It was a 50-50 weird decision when I heard that she said, I can go back, because I think in my head, I don't want to quit, but there was a good chance that someone was going to tell me that I had to. So I had a lot of mixed emotions on that Monday, which was the day we went into New York. I didn't know how it was going to what the outcome was. I didn't know how I was going to have to deal with that issue. So to have the podiatrist say, no problems at all. She was very calm, knew I still had another 26 days, knew I still had another 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers to run. And she stayed calm and went, okay, what I can see is let's put a limit of 5 days, and the doctor can assess you on course and you can start on a controlled program to go back into the race. So off we left the podiatrist. It actually gave me a bit of reinvigoration because I thought, okay, the decision's there. And again, with that, and like everything else, like Volstate, it put that decision directly back on me and nobody else. So I'm sitting in the car getting driven back to the course, thinking, I have to now make that decision. If anything changes, I can't say it's nobody else but myself. So I now really need to think, how do I do this decision? And it didn't take long to realize that there was only one decision, and that was, I do really want to continue. We were lucky enough to negotiate on that journey back 5 days down to 4 days, and that 4 days included the day that I was taken off course. So, so we had 4 days rest, and I was allowed to, if the doctor was happy, to come back on the Thursday. So pretty much I had only 3 more days off my feet, which was good. So that gave me a goal of going, all right, we're going to, in my mind, in my body, I'm going to make sure I can get myself in a position that we can start all over again. I really enjoyed coming back on course every morning. I felt fulfilled. I felt like that was where I was supposed to be. It made me feel good in myself. It actually made me feel okay to then go off course and have my feet up for the rest of the day. I didn't feel like that I was doing the wrong thing. It actually felt like it was just part of my day. That day just didn't include going around the course. That day meant I was off my feet. Coming back on the Thursday, the doctor looked at my feet. We were all good to go. We came up with a game plan. It was a reduced day. I was only allowed to go to 6 p.m. So it was a 2/3 day. We all agreed to that. And off I went. 2 things that morning when I stood on that start line. The biggest difference was I still had all my running gear on, but this time I had my shoes on and I didn't have my sandals on. And we stood on that start line, and all the other runners next to me all looked down at my feet, and every one of them instantly got a smile on their face. And that's all they did. They just all smiled. Their eyes glowed, their faces lit up. And I realized, I actually found out I was actually recompleting the family again. What I found while I wasn't there is, and they actually said the atmosphere was different for the 4 days that I wasn't there, because everyone felt the family wasn't complete. So, and this was told to me by Prachar at a later date. So that was very, very touching within myself, that I was part of this special family that gives everyone this drive to know why we're out there. So when I stood there on Thursday and no one had to say anything, but they just knew it was my day back. And it was so touching just to see all their smiles. And off I went. And it only took one lap for me to realize that I felt like I was back at home again. Being on that course, that was my home. I knew that there was nothing else in this world, but being my journey, that was my place in life at that period or that point in time. That was my work. That was my discovery. That was my dreams. That was just my daily routine. That was just myself. And now that I was back out on course, I was back being who I was, and I felt like I was being where I should be. And I knew on that day, on that Thursday, which was day 26, I knew then, no matter what happens, I will get to the end. Whether it's with a good distance, whether it's not, it didn't matter anymore. But I knew no matter what happened, I had nothing in my head to say, maybe in 10 days' time, I'm going to want to feel like I want to stop again. I just knew that was never going to come back into my mind. So that really changed me. And I think knowing that made me realize that your life is that point in life. Nothing else mattered in life anymore, but it made me realize that I had a lot of important people in my life. I knew while I was there, I had the runners that were beside me. That was my family. I inspired them while they also inspired me. And we all helped each other to get through the day. And I know they didn't need my help physically to get through the day. They were all running brilliantly, but spiritually, it lifted their game to make them enjoy their day. It gave me purpose to know while I was there. Having that community there, I knew I had a commitment to that community. They invested a lot of time to put this on and to allow us to be there. They believed in me. So it allowed me to believe in them. And it also made me really discover, and the 4 days off is what really woke me up to the fact that and I didn't really know the extent of it all, but to think that I had so much of Australia who never knew this race, all of a sudden, I've been told that I've got the whole country watching me. I'm thinking, I'm just on the other side of the world running around an unassuming block in the middle of a suburb, trying to stay under the radar, but you completely weren't. I had people at work who were not runners and laugh and joke about my running for my whole life were glued to their computers and the updates, and I found out on the TV at work, they actually had the live feed going constantly at work with me running around this track. And you can't see this because it's all in the background. The messages that were coming through, so I would get your written letter messages every day that I got to read at the end of the day. And just when I spoke to my wife, Penny, every morning, that was my one ritual, that it was evening here, it was morning there. Half an hour after we started, I would do a 15-minute talk with Penny, and she would just let me know how many people were following me at home. And that just blew me away. And I realized I had a commitment also to the running community in Australia. So I realized then that I was actually the ambassador to that over there while still doing my journey. And that was very, very humbling for me. And that was one of my biggest drivers to do that. So it all just keeps coming back to that allowed me to feel proud of myself and make me realize that this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And this is what I loved. I just love doing it. And it actually makes me enjoy who I am. And I think I just keep discovering that. So it's what makes me happy going forward. So I think that's where I find that was a big turnaround in my life, that it just shows you can be proud of yourself. You can realize that there is so much more out there while there is so little out there. So it's and being on that course, while I realized all that was in the background, at the end of the day, it was about where you were on that course. Your whole world within yourself was probably only 5 meters radius. All you cared about was your next run to the next corner, and that was 50 meters long. Your next run over that hump, past that tree stump, past that step in the gutter, past the entrance to that driveway. Then you're passing the baseball court. Then you pass the community park. Then you're passing the same people playing handball that you watched for 52 days, who looked at you strange on day one and were actually your mates by the end of the 52 days. And you became part of the community there. You actually became part of the landscape. But they also did for us as well. So I looked forward to knowing that, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, these same guys are going to come back. They're going to put on their music. They're going to put their chairs out. They were going to sit there and play their handball. And I knew when they were going to come every day. And you knew when the school was going to start in the morning. You knew when the school finished. And you look forward to those moments. So they became your world. So it just shows you the small things were just as important as the bigger things in life. And that's what a race like that really makes you discover. It's not just about the worldly things, the biggest goals. It's about they're just as important, and you need them just as much as you need all the little things in your life as well.
The lessons that you are sharing with us are so deep and so beautiful. it's such a metaphor for as you say, spiritual growth. I'm a little bit taken aback with that story. Before we move on, can you take us to the end of that race? And I mean, I'm thinking about the final lap, but what it was like to go through such a difficult time, be faced with that, either being pulled from the race completely or having to make the decision yourself, overcoming that, finding that new level, and then completing it. Can you take us to the last moments or the aftermath and what it meant to you?
So talking about the last lap, so for me, there's always one thing I always do on a lot of my journeys, and what I find is at some point in either a race or a run or a journey, I do like to just stop and be thankful for what the world's given me, for what I've been able to do, and for where I am. So what I do a lot is during a race, I'll get to a point, no matter how I'm racing, how I'm running, doesn't really matter. And I'd like to just stop and just reflect. So I had a few years past, ran a race in the Flinders Ranges. It was put on by Ben Hocking. It was called the Hubert Miler, and it ran 100 miles through the Flinders Ranges. It was on the Hasten Trail mainly, and within that race, you got to climb the highest peak around Wilpena Pound called Mary's Peak, St. Mary's Peak. So on your return journey for your race, you go back up over the peak, and then you have only about 5Ks to the finish. And I'd actually reached that. I was actually having a beautiful race. I was out in front. I was way out in front. I was on my own. I'd run the whole race on my own, which I actually really enjoyed. And I got to the peak, and it was approximately 11:30 in the evening. It was beautiful, typical Australian outback, clear skies, and it was I think an almost full moon. The moon was just shining, so you could actually see the whole landscape of the whole Flinders Ranges and all the mountain ranges, and the backbone and the spine was just all glowing under the moonlight. And I actually just stopped there and I sat down and just looked out, and that was 5 minutes. I just sat there for 5 minutes, turned my head torch off, and was just very thankful for the opportunity of what life's allowed me to do, for what the race directors put on and given us the opportunity to be where we are, and just shown me how beautiful life is. So while my spiritual journey was different in those days, to me that was my spiritual journey, was allowing me to give a little bit back to the world out there, on a higher note, by just saying thank you. It's given me beautiful opportunities, and I wanted to just say thank you back. And I do that by just sitting down and reflecting on where I am and being thankful for what my opportunities are. So come to the 3,100 mile race, and it didn't come into my mind until the last day. I just knew that at some point in that last day, I would want to do the same. And it just happened to be, when you don't reach the distance, what they like all runners to do is to basically finish 52 days. Now, that would be running on that last day, but you get to run till midnight. Now, whatever you then get by midnight, that's your journey, that's your distance. But you can't run any further. There's no more time. You've literally run out of time. So we're running around, and just by chance, I'd managed to come through the start finish at a point where I had enough time to do one more lap. And everyone else was actually already in front of me. So, or you could say that they were all behind me. So they were all going to come in, and they would be finishing like 2 minutes before midnight, but wouldn't make it around. So there's no point them continuing. So I got round the back half of the block, and I basically knew there was no one left on course. I was now the only one there. It was midnight, or just before midnight, so it was all quiet. And I just knew there was one point on that course. I felt it was quite special. It was a place where every morning, all the female Sri Chinmoy ladies, they're called the Awakeners, they come out at 7 o'clock every morning and they sing their hymns. And they'll do that for about half an hour as you run past. And it's at a point where the school entrance is, at the top side of the course. Now, the direction we were running, it meant that that was literally probably only about 50 meters from the finish line, but it's just around a slight corner. Nobody can see it. So I think there was about 500 people sitting at the finish line to see us all finish, to celebrate the end of the actual 2 month journey. But back there, it was pitch black. It was dead quiet. The moon was out. And I thought, I really felt, I knew I was wanted another reflection. So I actually went quite quick on that last lap to just give myself a couple of minutes up my sleeve. And I got to that point and I was able to just stop on that last lap. It was 2 minutes to midnight. I sat on the wall where they'd been singing their songs for 52 days. I turned my head, I actually didn't have my head torch on, so I just sat there. It was dark. It was silent, and I just managed to just have a minute's reflection. Bit like our minute's silent reflection in the morning. That was mine, just for myself. And again, I just wanted to be thankful for what the journey allowed me to have, for where it allowed me to be, and what it actually allowed me to actually get out of it. And that was it was a beautiful moment just sitting there. And I'm just in a suburb, sitting on a school brick wall, but it actually took me right back to sitting on the top of St. Mary's Peak. All those years back in 2019 or 2018, all those years earlier, I felt like I was sitting there in the middle of the open country. So it doesn't matter where you are. Everything else just disappears, and it's actually life that you're reflecting on, and it's actually life that you're saying thank you to. Had 1 minute there, I got up. It was literally 1 minute left to midnight. And it was enough for me to go from there around to the finish line. And it gave me a chance to then really enjoy the celebrations because I managed to get what I needed beforehand. And then you could accept, because it was very busy. It was loud. There was a lot of people. You embraced all that while realizing your journey was finished. So I think I needed that to just find closure, and then I could go in and then enjoy the celebrations literally around the corner. So yeah, that was how my race ended. That was how I felt like I actually achieved what I achieved. I got my closure. I didn't feel disappointed at all, and it allowed me to be very thankful for what the journey allowed me to do and who gave me that opportunity. And that was thankful for the whole of Australia, for all my friends, for my wife, my family, the community, for Pachar, and for the other runners that were on course with me, and made me so proud of watching them all achieve their journeys and their goals and their finishing as well. So I didn't feel like that they did better than me. I was just proud that they got what they wanted and I got what I wanted. So yeah, it's a nice thing to do. It was beautiful.
It's a beautiful story. And the connection that you talk about, it's funny, you talk about being a solo runner, an individual, when you're training and enjoying your time alone, and that spiritual side that you've been developing really has got a deep connection to all of those people you mentioned, and connection to gratitude. And that is what comes through in the other side of you that you haven't talked about, which is you as a race director, putting on a race for other people to explore their limits, and being on the committee of AUTRA now for the past how many years, and developing a community for us and up and coming ultra runners to find what you have and push their limits. Can you talk about you as a race director now and being on the committee of AUTRA as well?
So the race directing, as you mentioned, it's just another side of what I want to give back. I think the sport has given me a lot. I've been very thankful for the opportunities that I think this ultra sport has done for me, where I've discovered what I've managed to do and what it's done, like how it's allowed me to grow and made me who I am. So I really enjoy wanting to give that back to the community. And I'd always thought about how great it would be to put on a race. I don't think being a race director is definitely for everybody. It's what you need to do is not so much it's just a lot of work. It's how you got to approach it. And I think when I look at all the race directors out there that do races, they all have a special attribute as to why they do it. And I think a lot of race directors have a very deep feeling as to they're putting it on not just to go, hey, I can make money off people. They're putting it on because they want to see people succeed in anything. And I have a very big connection with the Sydney 24-hour. It's how I discovered Sri Chinmoy. It's how I got to have a nice relationship with Pachar. And I'm really proud of the history of ultra running. And I really hold in high regard the founders of ultra running in Australia and what it was. And it was big in its day. It was very world class. And I think because of those founders back in the day, and that was a lot to do with their 6 day and the 24 hours, and Sydney was a big part of that, that allowed ultra running Australia to be where it is today. And I think a lot of us need to remember who actually started it for us, who grew it, who got it recognized. It just shows with all of them, our ultra community, or our AURA, which is now AUTRA, that's been going for 40 years. So I look back and think that is amazing that long ago that someone had the vision to go, we need to grow this and recognize this sport and allow people to understand that there is something special out there that they can all discover. So in 2020, for the reasons that they had, Sri Chinmoy moved their 24-hour race, which they had been running in Sydney for as long as I could, way before my time in running. And they moved to Canberra, which is where they're based, and picked up a local 48-hour race that they were asked if they could keep that one going. So it made sense for them to move down to their home base, keep that race going. But what that meant was it left a void in Sydney that Sydney has never had. And I think part of that history is Sydney having a 24-hour. So during the pandemic year, I had a lot of time to think, and I actually said to my wife, I feel that Sydney needs to have that race back, and I don't want it to lose that history. I don't want the community to lose an avenue where they can come together and feel inclusive. And I'd like to I'd like to put the race back on, and I'd like to continue Sri Chinmoy's 24-hour. So my first task to that is I actually approached Pachar, had a nice chat with him, and just asked him if he would feel okay if I was to continue his race in Sydney and keep that legacy going. He was touched by that, by saying that's beautiful. But then the next statement he said, which I thought was beautiful, was he goes, but Stephen, this will be your race. So fantastic that you want to keep the legacy going, but just remember, you're starting now a new legacy by creating your race. So go forth and put on what you want to put on. And I thought it was really nice. So to me, it was like I got his permission, which I didn't need, but it was his blessing to say, go ahead and do this. So I put a bit of investment in and spent 6 months, and we built it and brought in what we call the Southern Sydney 24-hour over and above the Sri Chinmoy 24-hour race. And my approach to that for this race was I really wanted it to be really, really community, a community environment. I wanted the community to feel that it's not a race where it's just about the elites. It's not a race where it's about the old school runners that a lot of people remembered it to be. I wanted them to realize that here's a race that, for whatever reason, whether you're comfortable, not comfortable, never run an ultra, have run an ultra, not sure about running on your own, never liked running at the back of a pack, come and join our race, and we will make everyone feel exactly the same. I didn't mind. I didn't care if someone broke a record. I didn't care who got what distance. I promoted it in the saying that everyone was there and everyone gets to share that 400-meter track together. No one has to feel like that holding up the race directors. No one had to feel like that they were dragging the chain. No one had to feel intimidated because people were so much quicker, bigger, or better than them. And everyone got to share people that they may never see because they've disappeared off into the distance. They get to now actually run and share and hear their stories. And that was how I got my story back in 2016. The person who gave me that was a guy named John Pearson. So I met him at the Sri Chinmoy 24-hour in 2016 for the very first time, not realizing during that 24 hours that he was an Australian representative. I didn't even know what that meant. He explained it all to me. Realized that he actually represented Australia over, I think, 6 or 7 times at that point in time. And the encouragement he gave me, now I'm running what I thought was, here's a nobody running with the best in the country. And he had so much time for me. The amount of hours we ran around that track and the advice he gave me and imparted was, I found, was I can't put into words. It's something I'll never lose. And it was worth so much. It's like you can't put a value on what he gave me. And I remember him telling me, we finished that race, and he came up to me and his words were, "I'll be seeing you on the Australian team one day." And that was it. And like, I didn't know what the Australian team was. I thought, I'm not at that level. And he just left it at that. I met him again that end of that year at Costa Cosi. The words of wisdom and having running with him at the start of Costa Cosi, I felt like I was back on the track again. That's another race that has such a beautiful community vibe and a connection. And again, I remember we're at the end of that race, we're talking on the grass out the back, all celebrating our finish. And someone was talking to him, asking about his experience. And this person said, I'm here with bated ears. I want to hear your experience. And I came up and I said exactly the same. Oh, that's me as well. I want to hear your experience. And again, his words were, Stephen, you don't have to listen to my experience because you are one of us. You are one of the ones that are experienced, and people want to listen to you. And I said, no, you've got it wrong. And John said, no, you don't. I said, trust me, and you'll realize it one day that you'll be the person giving out that experience. And said, and that's who you are. So having people like that on the track and making me realize that we're all exactly the same. And that's what I brought across to my race. And I was lucky enough, it actually showed in my first year I put on the event. I ended up with 140 runners across my 5 races. I couldn't believe it. People just kept entering. It was amazing. And people loved that whole weekend. They went away, the amount of messages I got, they're saying they've never been to a race like that before. It was just so inclusive. They felt like they were part of it. Everyone felt like they were the winners. Everyone was proud of their achievements. And it's like, that's what I wanted. That was my vision. And that's what I got out of it. So lucky enough for the next 2 years, my race even grew more. I actually added a 48-hour to the event. And I think that's where I always wanted to go. There's only one other 48-hour, which Sri Chinmoy now run in Canberra. And I felt that Australia is big enough to house more than one and to give people the opportunity to really push beyond the limit. And I knew what a 48-hour was like. And it's a very big push, so much different to a 24. But at least people can know that they can do that on a track environment where it is 100% safe. And it doesn't matter that 48 hours has to be 100 miles long or 200 miles long. It can be whatever it wants to be. And all of a sudden, the next 2 years, my race grew to the point where I'm having 200 people come to my event. I had all races sold out. And the atmosphere, when you see 3 of those, so the way the races are split, I might have, say, 3 running at the same time on the track, and just having people everywhere around the track, and then all the crew tents all set up, and it was a full carnival atmosphere, and the vibe in the community was just, it was amazing. So again, everything I always wanted to put on. So exactly how I wanted it. I know why I want to do it. I've had a bit of a hard time this year. We had a lot of track certification issues. Councils have changed since the pandemic, so very hard to get them to be acceptance of an event like mine, because I think the modern day councils don't understand where we come from. So they get a bit scared, so they don't want to be a part of it. I was lucky enough to go back to my last year's track, which is Campbelltown. And as I've said to them, I thank them very much, because they really made us feel very inclusive and very welcome into their environment. So I'm glad I managed to go back. While we not have a certified track, but we have a place where we can still bring the community and allow that community to realize that at the end of the day, it's not about the small amount of people coming, it's about having it for everybody. So again, that's my way. While it maybe people see that it's made me grow being a race director, I feel it's my way of saying thank you back to the running community and Australia for what it's allowed me to have the opportunity to have. So now it's my chance to give that a little bit back to everybody else and give them that opportunity as well. So, and that was also why I stepped up and became part of AUTRA's committee. And it was just my extension of me being a race director. It was, I wanted to at least have the opportunity to be able to help grow that ultra running in Australia and take it to the new direction and allow it to be there for everybody and have my small part in keeping that going. So yeah, it's my volunteer status to go back. And again, it's to give back to the community. So, and I think I've had enough options. So I can give a bit of my time back. And AUTRA won't be forever. Everyone has a time frame there, and we pass it on to the next committee. And then nice thing with that is they have their vision to make it grow even more. But I've always had my race, so I can still, that race will be mine. So that will keep going even after my time at AUTRA. So yeah, I can always at least give something back while I'm still gaining and getting something out of it. I can always give something back to it as well.
I want to say thank you on behalf of runners and mere mortals that you take the time and the energy, and for each race director who does that, to give us that cauldron to explore our limits in, and the community aspect. And if you are thinking about doing Stephen's race, it is on at the end of the month, where it's 3 hour, 6 hour, 12 hour, 24 hour, and you're all on the track at the same time. It is a bit of a party atmosphere. You're never alone. You can run with the best runners in Australia, and experience what it's like. So yeah, I highly recommend doing that. There's so much more I want to ask you. The time is ticking. I want to take a step back. It's so clear how you get clear on your reasons for doing something, including joining AUTRA, including putting on your own race. But I want to ask this question for us out there, or for someone out there who's thinking about the next race. When you select your adventures, sorry, when most of us select our adventures, we look at a race, we pick it, and then our brain says all the reasons why it's going to be hard, or we can't do it, or why we shouldn't do it. And all of the inner critic comes and attacks us and says, you know what, maybe you should just not do this one and do something a bit shorter or closer to home or something. Can you tell us how when you choose a race, do you get that inner critic saying you possibly can't do it and you should pick something else? And how do you deal with it?
No, I've never, I've never come across that, which is really good. First and foremost, to me, whatever I look at, only ever starts at the biggest distance. I've never really actually looked at any of the shorter distances. To me, they just don't exist. So if I want to look at a traditional race, it's just, I just see what the biggest is, and I'll just decide, is that the right one for me? Generally, how I pick, and because of the way my journeys are these days, they're not traditional races. So I probably find that I could do an adventure or a challenge myself, which is just what I will do during the week or a weekend. Sometimes they can actually be longer than most races. Or if I pick a journey or a non-traditional race where you're still paying, there's still a few rules, but generally I tend to find that there seems to be less and less rules in what I'm picking. They keep it simpler and simpler, which I quite like, leaving it up to the runner. But I think I'll look at what I want first. What's my next goal? What's my next journey? Or what's my next challenge? I'll look at that first, and then I'll go seek what might be out there that could meet what I'm after. So instead of going, oh, here's a race, it's on the right weekend, I'm off, I'll just pick that and then go through and go, how am I going to tackle that race? I'll look at what I want to tackle first. Now, if there's not a race that meets that sort of criteria for me, I'll then just go look out in the big wide world. What sort of journey can I do to meet what I want to do? So this year I did a couple where part of my training for Ball State was to head out with no expectation and have an empty pack, which is what I had to do in the race. And can I go and enjoy that? So I did a couple of midweek long runs. One was from Sydney down to Bundanoon. So it was 100 miles. I started in the late afternoon, so I get to run all through the night and then into the next day. And basically, that one was just take my pack, off I go. I had a few small things just as a backup because there were a few stints around Picton during the night that were quite long. So I needed a little bit of on me and off I go. So I didn't really research it. I just knew I'm just going to go this way and we'll just go. Beautiful. So lucky enough, my wife picked me up at Bundanoon. It was an exact 100 miles, took me 23 and a half hours. So that was just a nice middle of my block off work. That was my nice midweek long run. Then I decided a few weeks later, I think it was about a month later, time for another little challenge. One I've always wanted to do was a nice big urban loop. Now I've run a lot of areas in Sydney. I've run Sydney to home. I've run Sydney to Wollongong. I've run South Head, Barrenjoey Lighthouse to Wollongong Lighthouse. They're all 50, 100, 145 Ks. I've run along Botany Bay. I've done runs out along the cycle path along the Cooks River to Centennial Park. I've done the whole M7 cycleway, done that as an out and back. So that's like double marathon. And then I've also done little road areas here and there. So I always wanted to see, could I connect a big loop, starting at my front door and finishing it back at home. So there's no transporting, but predominantly trying to stay off the road. And I decided to join all those little paths up and I called it my urban 150. So it was 150 Ks and it was predominantly 80% on either footpaths, cycleways, walkways, riverways. There was a path on the T-Way out at Parramatta, the M7 cycleway, and then basically the last 35 Ks, while still on footpaths, was probably the closest to the road. So that was back through Liverpool, back through Alfords Point, Medai, and then just jumping down through the bush just for the last 2 Ks, cross what we call the Needles, and then back home. And again, I just woke up one morning. I didn't even have anything packed. I had nothing sorted. Penny went to work. I went, okay, this is a good morning to do it. Grabbed my pack, pretty much put my minimal stuff in there. I actually didn't, I think I took 4 little bags of tailwind and that was it. And put on my running gear, messaged my wife and said, it was 7 in the morning, said, I'm heading off. I'll see you tomorrow morning. And then off I went. So, and I enjoyed that. So it was the challenge of the unknown. And I think that's how I selected. So Vol State was the same. I needed to find something that was even more challenging. And that's looking around, that's what was on offer. And I thought that met everything that I was after. So beautiful. I think even though it's a race and I could have just gone and done it, I think I liked it because it gives you a bit of commitment because you've entered something, and it was overseas. So it just meant I'm going to discover a whole different area I probably would never ever get to just on a general holiday, and take you out of the main tourist areas, and all of a sudden you're going to start discovering what the real country was like. And I thought that met everything I wanted most definitely. There's a no-brainer. The Tunnel Ultra that I'm going to do next year, same thing. How can I push my mind to go a bit further? Um, the 3100 was all about what was in your mind and in your body. And I thought, what else is out there? And I've been following it for a few years, and I thought that meets everything that I'm after. I want to know now, it's not physically, can I push myself? It's not about, can I get through a course where I've got to try and discover everything? This one's just purely, can I get my mind to go the distance? When they take everything else out of the world by just being in a black tunnel, you've got nothing left but to focus on your mind now. And I thought, what a nice, good challenge. So I'll pick that one next. And that's how I do it. So it's I feel for a lot of people, as long as they don't get too caught up in what the expectation is of them, let discover first what you want, and then go forth and pick where you want to do it. So definitely pick the race. It doesn't have to be what I do. You can discover that in your local park run. You can discover that in your first ultra at 50 Ks, or your first trail run, or your first 100K. But first discover what you want to do, and then go forth and find what can give you that. But don't go in and feel you need to enter a certain race and then feel the pressures of what that race gives you, because that's where I find people have a hard time. It's because all of a sudden expectation takes over, and then they question themselves because they're now not doing it for themselves, but they're feeling like they're doing it for somebody else. So yeah, discover what your enjoyment is first. And there's so much out there, and it doesn't have to be a race. So push yourself your limit, but just on your own run. Do something that you've never done on your own. Even if it's on a Saturday, take some friends with you, do it on your own. But go do something that you may not normally do, and you'll find you'll be the discovery you get out of that at the end of the day or the end of the run will be amazing. So it may even be your first night run that you've never done before, or it may be that first, I'm going to do my first 100K. Now, if you need a race, that's fine. And sometimes we need that commitment. But if that's what you want to do first, instead of going, oh, what's out there? And I think anyone who does that will love it and enjoy the journey that they do.
I can't tell you how profound that advice is. And I I'm just soaking it all in myself, because there's so many people that need to hear that and soak it in, that when you start with what do you want to get out of this, and what's the challenge that you want, or what's the growth that you're looking for, and to start from that place before you open the race calendar and start flicking through options. Thank you. I can't think of a better place to leave our conversation than that. I thank you for your time, for your wisdom. I'm still kind of processing a lot of the things that you've said to me, and I'm sure everyone listening is. I can't thank you enough for sharing your experience, for showing us how to go deeper into our reasons for doing this, and laying that out for us, giving us beautiful examples. But also thank you for giving back to the community in the way that you do, and showing us how, when you evolve beyond racing and times and splits and distances, what the impact that you can have on people. And that's what you're doing, as you continue to push these limits, but also through your race and being on the Ultra committee. So Stephen Redfern, thank you so much, mate.
Oh, you're welcome. been a pleasure and loved it. Yeah, nice to be able to share that with such a great person like yourself. So yeah, I want to thank you as well. So I feel very humbled that yeah, you've asked me to come and join you with this conversation today. So, and it's nice, yeah, nice to be able to share it, and it makes me discover and also appreciate within myself too what I'm able to do and what I've done. Because we all sometimes do forget because we got such busy lives. So I do appreciate being able to do this because it allows me to just take a bit of stock of what I do and how much I do enjoy it. So yeah, it's good.
And just briefly, your race is at the end of this month, Southern Sydney 24, and also you've just been accepted into your 5th Costa Kosciuszko. Just by the by, in all the other things you've done around the world, this November will be your 5th Costa Kosciuszko, a race that I know is dear to your heart, and I will be seeing you there.
Yes, another special race, and the first race I've ever actually done 5 times. So it's as you can probably discover, and as you would know, Rob, I tend to just keep changing up everything I do. So I'm not the sort of person just to keep coming back. But with Costa Cosy, it has a very uniqueness to it, and it has a different discovery every year. So I find you can come back year in and year out, and you're discovering something new every single time. So it's not like you're doing the same thing year in, year out with this race. So I love coming back, and I know this probably won't be my last time, but I know that I'm really going to enjoy my 5th running down at Costa Cosy and the community that's there and the journey and what you share with it with your own roving crew and that rewarded finish line up in the high country is everything that I've always discovered in running. It just happens to be in such a beautiful race and an environment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
What a beautiful way to say each time you go back to a race, there's more than just trying to do it faster or whatever. There's a whole thing that you can discover. And if we put the blinders on and we don't allow that in, and as you have shown us, if we don't allow ourselves to connect and to think about this from a bigger place, we can really get stuck and miss a whole lot of the experience. And you've just articulated that so well, that this is another journey and discovery for you in Costa Cosy. So thanks, mate.
Welcome.
And I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for listening to the Mindset for Runners podcast. I hope you got something practical and useful out of this podcast, or something inspiring to help you get out for your next run. If you have a question about Mindset for Runners or athletes in general, please email me at robmason.run@gmail.com and I'll answer your question on an upcoming podcast. And if there's anybody you know who could benefit from the information I share in this podcast, please share it with them. See you next time.